Welcome back. So we're going to move on now from talking about the first part of the 5-part model on strength, and we're going to look at health and how the health affects leadership and how health affects happiness. And specifically, we're going to look at health in the context of stress. Stress is becoming a very serious problem in our society, in our culture. In the United States, for example, 94% of college students around the country, 94% of 18-year-old to 22-year-olds are overwhelmed and stressed by everything that they have to do. The adult population is experiencing a lot of stress. In China, your government has recently come out saying that we need to take better care of the rising stress levels in our population. The Australian government has recently come up with a similar declaration, saying that we need to take better care of the rising levels of stress and anxiety, whether it's in our children or whether it's in the adult population. All over the world, this is becoming a huge issue. If you look at newspapers, the headlines, this is what they're saying. Health, saying that stress is affecting our health, that stress is very often responsible for killing us, that the workplace is becoming a place where people experience more and more stress. The reason is because we're a lot busier. The reason is because we're doing so many more things. Well, we in our modern life have to juggle so many things. We have to juggle our work, so many different things at work, and we have to juggle our home life, and we're busier and we're busy all the time, and we're on all the time. And this is leading to rising levels of stress. I want to show you a quick video, and look at what happens to him during the interview.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me. My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited in the last 6 months to a year.
So, this is what modern life looks like. And it's challenging, and it's hard, and it's very stressful. Which is why I hope that by the end of the presentation today, you will all be a lot calmer. You will all look like this. So what do we do about stress? How can we better deal with the rising stress levels in our society? The first thing, and I'm going to talk about 3 things to keep in mind. 3 things that the best people do, the people in the middle. Not the psychopathology of the average, what most people do. What the best people in the middle do. What those leaders whom we can learn from do. The first thing that they do is that they simplify. They simplify their lives. This is easier said than done. But let me explain what I mean by sharing with you a few studies. So this first study is from Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize winner in economics, but actually a trained psychologist. And Daniel Kahneman did research about the importance of doing less rather than more. Here is what he did. He studied women, so this was the population that he studied, women in Europe and the United States. This applies as much to women here. He studied professional women, women who are working. It applies as much to women who are working in China. In fact, it applies as much to men who are working, whether in China or in the US or Europe. But his focus in this particular research was on women. What he wanted to understand was the emotional experience of these professional women throughout the day. In other words, how did they feel when they were at work? How did they feel when they were with their partner? How did they feel when they were with their kid? How did they feel when they were with their best friend? What was their emotional state when they were having lunch or shopping or whatever it was that they were doing? And he created a picture of the women's emotional experiences throughout the day. The most surprising result of this study was that these women, these professional women, did not particularly enjoy spending time with their kids. Now, this was surprising to Daniel Kahneman and his colleagues. So he studied it deeper, further. And it wasn't that these women did not love their kids. For most of these women, their kids were the most important part of their lives. What was it then? It was that when these women were with their kids, they were not really with their kids. Meaning they were physically there, present, but at the same time they were talking to a friend on the phone, or doing some work, or thinking about what they did earlier or what they needed to do later. So while individually they may have really enjoyed each one of these activities, whether it's being on a phone with a friend, or doing work, or being with their kids, when all these activities came together, it was too much of a good thing. And quantity of activities affected quality of experience. Quantity of activities affected quality of experiences. Think about the following analogy. Let's say you're listening to your favorite piece of music. And let's say your favorite piece of music is like mine, and you would be listening to Whitney Houston's "And I Will Always Love You." It's my favorite song. But let's say you're listening to your favorite song, whatever it is. And you're listening to it with your eyes closed, focused. And after the song is over, you're asked to rate the song on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And given that it's your favorite song, you give it a 10. And afterwards, you're asked to listen to your second most favorite song. And if your second most favorite song is like mine, you're listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Pa-pa-pa-pam. Or whatever your second most favorite song is. Eyes closed, focused, and afterwards you're asked to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And you give it a 9.5. Beethoven is good, but it's not as good as Whitney Houston, you must admit. And then, for your best optimal, ideal experience, you take your two most favorite pieces of music and you play them together. What do you get? 19.5? No, you don't get a 10. You don't even get a 5. It's noise. And that is modern life for you. So many people come to me and ask, tell me, Why aren't I happy? They ask about themselves, and they say to me, you know, I have all these things in my life. I have a family that I like. I have work that's meaningful to me. I have all these hobbies, and they actually list all their hobbies. Why aren't I happy? They ask me. And I say to them, for the exact same reason that you would not be happy listening to Whitney Houston and Beethoven together. Quantity of activities affects quality of experience. There can be too much of a good thing, and this is what modern life is all about. That's stressful. That leads people to be unhappy in the long term. What the most successful people, the people in the middle, are able to do is they're able to simplify, to do less. How, for example, do they do it? Leslie Perlow from Harvard Business School has done research showing that managers who find those quiet times where things are simpler, 1 hour to 2 hours a day, are overall more productive, more creative, as well as happier. They become better leaders. Not because they stop multitasking, they don't. They multitask a lot. But they also have times during the day when they're just focusing on that one thing. I want to see a quick show of hands in this room. How many of you have your email on, or WeChat, or some communication? How many have it on while you're doing other work that requires concentration? I want to see a show of hands. How many people, while you're doing work, also have your emails on? Okay, so it's most people. My generation, it's about 80% of the people. The millennials, it's close to 100% of the people. I used to do that too. I used to have my email on while doing other work that requires concentration. Until I found out about this research. This research was done at the University of London by a group of psychiatrists. And what they did was they showed the following. They showed that if you have your email on while doing other work that requires concentration, it is the equivalent of losing 10 IQ points. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't afford to lose 10 IQ points. It's a lot. Just to give you a sense of how much 10 IQ points is, so let's say you haven't slept at all for 36 hours. Do you know how you feel like when you don't sleep at night? You're groggy and you can't really focus. This is 10 IQ points less than normal. Now, of course, if you go to sleep, you get these IQ points back. But this is 10 IQ points less. We pay a very high price when we have our email on while doing other work that requires concentration. Now, that doesn't mean we cannot multitask. We have to multitask. But if you're able to find, as Leslie Perlow from Harvard Business School showed, if you're able to find 1 hour or an hour and a half a day of focus time when you're doing one thing and one thing alone, that will not just increase your productivity and creativity, that will also increase your job satisfaction. You will become happier. You need what I have come to call islands of sanity. Islands of sanity during the day. Because we're all so crazy busy. We're all so stressed. You have to have some moments during the day when you're only doing one thing. And remember what I said earlier, the changes don't have to be extreme. They don't have to be radical. Small changes make a big difference. There's a lot of research on money and happiness. And I mentioned it earlier in the course where I said money actually does not contribute to happiness beyond basic levels. So of course, if you don't have any food on your table and you don't have enough money for education or for a home, then of course money is important for happiness. But beyond basic levels, additional money doesn't contribute to happiness. It may contribute in the short term, but then in the long term, nothing. People who win the lottery, who win millions and millions of dollars, are very happy when they win it. This is something they've been dreaming of their whole lives. But you know what happens 6 months later? They go back to where they were before. No change. So money does not predict happiness. What does predict happiness? It's what psychologist Tim Kasser calls time affluence. This is the feeling that we have time, that we're not always running, that we're not trying to juggle too many things in the air, that we can just sit down and focus on work, or just sit down or run around and focus on our children. Not try doing everything together. This is what contributes to happiness. It's about giving time, having time for play, for family and friends. One thing about the importance of play. The importance of play for leaders, for managers, not just for children. So I want to share with you, once again, a personal story. In 2008, I received a large package in the mail. I open it up. It's from Dr. Stuart Brown. Dr. Stuart Brown is a researcher in the area of play. I start taking a look at the book, and I can't put it down. It's fascinating. I read every word of it. It's a thick manuscript. I finish reading it, I write something very nice, and I'm really taken by this book. And it's all about the importance of play for children and how they develop through play. It's about the importance of play for adults and how we become more creative, happier when we play. And after I put it down, I call up my friend. My friend Shirley is a child psychologist. She's my go-to person whenever I have questions about my children. So I call her up and I say, Shirley, you know, I just read this amazing manuscript. It's about the importance of play for adults and for children. And then I said to her that I'm really worried, that I'm concerned. And she said, why are you concerned? And I said, I'm concerned because David, our eldest son, who was 4 at the time, I'm concerned because David doesn't play enough. And as soon as I say this, I say David doesn't play enough, there is silence on the other side of the line. And I said, hello, Shirley, are you there? And she said, yeah, I'm here. A few more seconds go by, and then she asks me the question. She says, Tal, do you play enough? It was a rhetorical question. The answer was no. And from that day on, I started to play a lot more. This was 10 years ago. At home, we play all the time. We play basketball. We dance a lot together. We laugh a lot more. I started to bring more play to my work, with my colleagues, with my employees, in my teaching. Yes, I still have that very serious side. That's fine. And I bring a lot more play to my life. And what a difference that has made as I've become a more effective leader and a more effective parent. Now here is the thing. We cannot play, or rather we don't play, when we have 100 things that we need to juggle all at the same time. We need to put time aside if we are to play. And remember earlier I talked about how 91% of managers do not exercise their strength? Most people in the world, whether it's 80% or 95%, most adults in the world do not have enough time for play. What's even worse is that most children today do not have enough time for play. Why? Because we're so obsessed with getting our children to be successful that we don't give them a free moment. They need to simplify their lives, or we need to help them simplify their lives so that they have more free time to play, to develop, to grow, free time to be creative. Children's lives today are too complex. And just as we simplify our own lives, we need to also simplify their lives. This is the first thing that leaders and managers, whether it's at home or in the workplace, do, who are the best. They simplify their lives, not all day, but parts of the day, so that they have time for family and friends, so that they have more time affluence. The second thing that we found when we studied those best leaders is that actually over the years we've been studying and looking at the wrong phenomenon. We have been attacking stress, calling it the silent killer, seeing it as disastrous. But actually we have been studying the wrong thing, because stress is not the problem. You see, actually, potentially, stress can be good for us. This is what we learn from the best leaders. Think about it. What happens when you go to the gym and you lift weights? You lift weights and you're stressing your muscles. Is that a bad thing? No. It can actually be a good thing, because you lift weights and 2 days later you go back to the gym and you lift more weights, and you become stronger and stronger over time. When do the problems in the gym begin? The problems in the gym begin when you go to the gym and you lift weights, and a minute later you lift more weights, and a minute after that you lift even more weights, and more and more. That's when the problems begin. That's when you get injured. That's when you get weaker rather than stronger. The problem, therefore, is not the stress, which can potentially be good for us. The problem begins when there is no recovery. You see, the difference between those people in the middle, the best, and the psychopathology of the average, the difference between them is not the experience of stress. Both of them experience stress, as much, in fact. The difference is that the people in the middle, the best leaders, the flourishing, the happiest leaders, also take time aside for recovery. Throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout their life. They energize themselves with recovery at different levels. What healthy and happy people do, what the most successful leaders do, is that they have real recovery throughout their lives. For example, on the micro level, they have recovery in terms of every hour or two, they take 15 minutes aside to meditate, or just to have a cup of coffee with a colleague. Or they have a relaxing meal, not a meal when they're on the phone and doing work at the same time, which is not relaxing, which is increasing stress. Or they go to the gym on a regular basis. That's a form of recovery from work. So there are all these forms of recovery. One of my colleagues went to work with a company in New York City, a trading company. They trade with stocks. And he went to them, and they were very stressful, and they were paying a high price because they were also getting sick, and they were unhappy. So they brought him in as a consultant. And he said to them, I have the solution for you. You see, he said, stress is not the problem is lack of recovery. And they said, fine, what do we need? And he said, every 2 hours, I want you to take a 15-minute break to do nothing, or just to meditate, or get away from the stress. And they said to him, we can't. 15 minutes, you know what can happen 15 minutes on those screens in the world markets? We have to be on all the time. He said, how about 5 minutes? They said, no. They said, we even eat our lunch in front of those screens so that we don't miss anything. He said, okay, how about 30 seconds? They think for 10 seconds, and they said, yeah, 30 seconds we'll give you. What have you got? And he said, okay, here's what I want you to do. He said, what I want you to do is every 2 hours to take 30 seconds off. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. Something like 5 seconds in, and then 5 seconds out. 3 deep breaths, that's all. 30 seconds, every 2 hours or so. And they started to do it. And just that made a big difference in their experience of their overall day and week. Why? Because the problem is not the stress. The problem is the lack of recovery. And if you can introduce recovery throughout your life, even if it's just 30 seconds on a regular basis, that in and of itself makes a big difference. Remember, one of the things that I'm talking about throughout this course is that small changes can have significant impact on your overall experience. So that's micro-level recovery. There's also mid-level recovery. That is about getting a good night's sleep. So much research is coming out from Stanford, Berkeley, other universities around the world, showing how important it is to get a good night's sleep. And if you can't fall asleep, that's okay, just lie down in bed. But having that recovery at night is critical for psychological functioning, for physical functioning, for how you do in terms of your happiness and your leadership abilities. Taking a day off is important. And a day off doesn't mean just being away from work, but at the same time being on the phone all the time and working all the time. That's not a day off. That's simply more stress. Really taking a day off. And more research is showing that people who know how to take a day off, a real day off, are more productive overall throughout the week than people who don't. And finally, a longer vacation. That could be 3 weeks off, or that could be a week off 2 or 3 times a year. But having these longer periods of recovery is critical for well-being. It's critical for happiness. It's also critical for leadership. Why? Because as a leader, as a manager in the 21st century, you're running around constantly. If you don't take breaks, you may be more efficient in the short term. In the long term, you pay a very high price for it, in terms of your happiness and in terms of your ability to lead. Have periods of recovery. Play more, that's a form of recovery. Take time off to do nothing, that's a form of recovery. Follow nature's law. What do you see in nature? In nature, there are seasons. There are seasons when the ground rests, when the trees rest. And then there is a season when they produce, when they create. And that's what Lao Tzu is talking about. He says we need to model our life on nature. Nature is not 24/7, constantly working. Nature has its ups and downs, its lows and its highs. And this is what we need to look at and learn from as leaders as well. And this is what the people in the middle, the happiest, most successful leaders do. So they simplify and they have periods of recovery throughout their life. There is one more thing that the happiest, healthiest, most successful leaders do. And that is they have a different perception of stress compared to other people. What does this mean? Most people think that stress is bad for us. The happiest, most successful people, the best leaders, actually think that stress is potentially good for us, especially when it comes with recovery. Let me share with you the research conducted by Kelly McGonigal from UCLA. For many years, she taught about the negative benefits of stress. She subscribed, agreed with what most people, what the average person says about stress, which is that stress is terrible, is bad for us. So they studied them. They studied those people in the middle who were part of the larger population of stressed people. They were stressed, but they were living longer. They were less likely to have chronic diseases. Why? What was the difference? The difference between those people in the middle who were as stressed as the others was, first of all, that they had more time for recovery. But second, importantly, they perceived stress as potentially helpful, as potentially enhancing. So, yes, they were stressed, but no, they didn't see it as something which was bad. In other words, just their perception of stress, just because they reframed stress from being unhelpful, bad, to being potentially helpful, good, just that change in mindset helped them become healthier, happier. They actually lived longer. One of my ex-students from Harvard, Aliyah Crum, who's today a professor at Stanford, did the following study. She went to a group of managers and leaders, like you, who were experiencing a great deal of stress in their lives. And she divided them into two groups. Group number one, business as usual. What's business as usual? What most people think, that stress is bad for you. The second group, she educated, she taught about the fact that stress can be enhancing, that stress can actually be good for you. She told them just what I'm telling you right now, how recovery is good, how it can make you stronger, how stress can actually lead you to deeper engagement at work, how stress can actually motivate you and get you to focus better. So they changed their mindset from stress is bad to stress is potentially good. In other words, she shifted them from the psychopathology of the average to learning from what works best. As a result, job satisfaction went up and their performance improved significantly. Just with a 30-minute intervention that told them the truth about the potential of stress. The price is incredibly high, and what we need to do is we need to learn from what the best prescribe for us. And what they prescribe is simplifying just a little bit so that we have islands of sanity throughout the day when we're with our family or when we're in front of a screen and just focusing on one thing. Not all day, but small parts of the day. We need to punctuate, to include recovery throughout our days. And finally, we need to see stress for what it is. Potentially strengthening, potentially focusing us, potentially helping us lead happier, healthier, and more successful lives. So to summarize, when it comes to health, the average, most people would tell you, just eliminate stress. Get rid of it. It's bad for you. But what the best would tell you, the people in this circle in the middle would tell you, is to embrace stress with recovery for maximum energy. So this is the second of the 5 components. The first one is strength. The second is health. The third one is absorption. When it comes to absorption, once again, there is a major difference between the average and the best. And once again, all of us can learn a great deal by studying those best leaders. Those leaders who are not just most successful, who are also the happiest. Let me explain that difference. If you ask most people, the average person, whether the average person in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, or Boston, New York, and Los Angeles, if you ask most people, when were you completely absorbed in an activity? When were you one with everything? When were you so connected that you felt a high? When were you so mindful and present that it was for you a peak experience? The answer that you would get from most people, whether here or across the oceans, around the world, the answers that you would get from most people, oh, it was when I had a major victory at work, when I got promoted at work, or when I got a raise, when I was made a manager. Other people would say, women especially, many would say, oh, it was when I had my first child. And I felt one with everything. It was a peak experience. For some women, not all women, but for some women. If you go to those select, the best managers and leaders, and you ask them this same question, when was it that you were one with everything? When did you experience absorption? When were you at your best peak? You know what they would say? They would say, oh, it's so funny you asked that. But just this morning, I had a meeting with a colleague, and we just really connected. And it was a very unique experience. Or, just last night, I went out for a walk with my best friend. It was an amazing experience. We looked and we saw the miracle of it all. The miracle in each other. They would answer that they experience absorption, one with everything, on a regular day-to-day basis. Not just during those special moments, those unique experiences, but on a day-to-day basis. Why? Because they're able to connect, to be absorbed, to connect to everything, to be absorbed at almost any time. Regardless of the activity, it doesn't have to be a unique, special event. They experience the ordinary as extraordinary. To explain how they do it, I want to share with you some research in the area of absorption or mindfulness meditation. Research on being present. Now, I'm sharing with you research now about a practice, a technique that was invented here in this part of the world. It's only over the last 40, 50 years that more and more Western scientists and practitioners have become interested in meditation, in Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, other forms of meditation. And the research that has come out over the last 50 years is remarkable. Let me share with you one such study that made a big difference, certainly in the West, bringing this ancient wisdom from here to the modern life, also the modern life of leaders and managers in organizations. So this was a study done by John Kabat-Zinn and Richie Davidson from Massachusetts and Wisconsin, respectively. What they did was they brought in people who are not professional meditators. They brought in people for an 8-week meditation course. During that course, here is what they did. Once a week, they would meet for a class, between 2 and 3 hours. And then during the week, the participants were given homework. Their homework was, you need to meditate every day for 45 minutes. So your homework is 45 minutes of meditation a day. After 8 weeks, remember, they meet once a week, 8 times, and they meditate 45 minutes a day. They're asked to meditate 45 minutes a day between meetings. At the end of the 8 weeks, they measure them across different areas. What they find, compared to a control group who had not yet taken the meditation course, is that those who went through the 8-week course are happier. They enjoy better relationships. They study their brain using EEG and fMRI. Their brains actually change during those 8 weeks. And they change in the direction of their brain becoming a happier brain. Not only that, they inject both the participants and those who were waiting, those in the control group, they inject everyone with cold bacteria, with flu. And what they found is that those who went through the 8-week meditation course develop more antibodies In other words, their immune system is stronger, better able to deal with illness as a result of the 8-week meditation course. They're able to concentrate better. This is remarkable. Think about it. What happens during an 8-week meditation course? What do you learn every week when you go to class? You learn about how important it is to be present. You learn about how important it is to be mindful. Not just when you're meditating, or not just when you're sitting down, or doing a yoga or a qigong pose. You're being reminded to be mindful, to be present all the time. So you can formally be present and mindful with your eyes closed and sitting in lotus position. But you can also be mindful and present when you go about your day-to-day. When you're working or when you're with friends. So we can formally meditate or we can informally meditate. Just like we can formally exercise or informally exercise. Formal exercise is about going to the gym and lifting weights or doing the bicycle. That's formal exercise. But informal exercise can be going shopping or walking up the stairs in my home. I'm still exercising. I'm still getting all the benefits from exercise, even if it's informal exercise. The same with meditation. When you're reminded week in and week out to be more present, to be more mindful, then you bring this quality of absorption to your everyday experience. And you experience mindfulness day in and day out. And you gain all the benefits that are associated with meditation. And just like you get the benefits from exercise, even if you informally exercise, you get the benefits of meditation even if you informally meditate. For example, while listening, that's an informal form of meditation. You know that there is research on listening in organizations. Employees who are listened to by their boss, by their manager, by their leader, are less likely to call in sick. They're more likely to be healthy day in and day out. Not to mention the fact that job satisfaction increases when they are listened to. Interestingly, when they are listened to, even if ultimately their manager doesn't do as they want him or her to do, just knowing that they're listened to increases their job satisfaction. Children who are listened to by their parents or teachers end up growing up to be more confident, more successful adults. But it's not just the person who's being listened to who benefits. Also the person who's doing the listening benefits. Why? Because when you're really listening, not trying to think, what am I going to say, but really listening, being present for them, you're practicing meditation. Informally, but you're practicing meditation with all the benefits that come with meditation. Or how about in conference calls? I'm not saying concentrate, for an hour each time you have a conference call. It's okay to multitask sometimes. But what if you bring 10 minutes or 15 minutes of just focusing on that call? That's meditation with all the benefits thereof. or when you're writing. Not when your email is on at the same time and there is music and you're talking and you're eating at the same time. What if you just focused on writing that report at work? For 20 minutes. That's meditation. Not only will productivity and creativity go up, your overall happiness will go up as well. To walk and to be present when you're walking, to listen and to be present when you're listening, to eat and be present while you're eating. And what a difference that can make. I want to take you back once again to this year, 1999, when the first conference in positive psychology was held. During that same year, Marty Seligman's partner, who was the co-founder of the field of positive psychology, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, published a paper. And the title of that paper was the following: If we're so rich, why aren't we happy? That's the question that he asked. If we're so rich, why aren't we happy? We are richer as a society. We have more money than our parents and grandparents had on average. And yet, there's more depression and more anxiety and more unhappiness today than before. If we're so rich, why aren't we happy? Asks Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. The best answer that I found comes from Tara Bennett Goldman, who in her book, Emotional Alchemy, provides the answer to our modern day unhappiness despite our increasing wealth. Here is what she writes in her book. The richest banquet, the most exotic travel, the most interesting, attractive lover, the finest home. All of these experiences can seem somehow unrewarding and empty if we don't really attend to them fully. If our minds are elsewhere, preoccupied with disturbing thoughts. I want to take you back a little bit to the previous session where I talked about simplifying. We can be spending time with our children, but we won't enjoy it if we're also doing so many other things at the same time. If we don't allow ourselves to be present, to be absorbed with whatever it is that we're doing. She continues. By the same token, the simplest of life's pleasures, eating a piece of fresh baked bread, seeing a work of art, spending moments with a loved one, can be amply rich if we bring full attention to them. The remedy to dissatisfaction is inside us, in our minds, not in groping for new and different outer sources of satisfaction. The simplest of things, if we're absorbed, when we give ourselves the time, the space to be present, these things can be extraordinary experiences. Remember, when you ask those people in the middle, the best leaders, when was the last time that you had a peak experience, that your life was extraordinary? They say, just this morning, just yesterday. They don't need to wait for this promotion at work, to become rich, to have the most amazing love life, to see this special work of art. They're able to experience extraordinary experiences in their day-to-day ordinary lives because they're present, they're absorbed. And they could do it formally while sitting down and meditating or doing yoga or qigong, or they can do it during their day-to-day lives. When eating, or listening, or working, or just walking. Albert Einstein once said, there are two ways in which we can live life. One way is as if nothing is a miracle. The other way is as if everything is a miracle. And if you think about it, everything really is a miracle. You know, the fact that we can see each other now, if you think about it, it's a miracle. The fact that we eat and can enjoy food, the fact that we have food to eat, shouldn't be taken for granted. It's a miracle. Life on Earth, space, it's all a miracle. And to enjoy that miracle, we need to be more mindful, more present, absorbed in whatever it is that we're doing. Because if we are not, then we can go through life where nothing really is a miracle. Or maybe, at best, there are a few moments here and there when a child is born, when we fall in love, when we become a manager. Maybe we experience those as miracles, but that's it. And those people, the best leaders, the most successful, thriving, flourishing leaders, experience life as a whole as a miracle. And we can exercise this muscle of being absorbed. That muscle that turns ordinary experiences into extraordinary ones. We can practice it formally by doing more meditation. You know, you're lucky. You have the best meditation teachers, the best Qigong and Tai Chi teachers, probably on your street where you live. The best in the world. You can go and study with them. And more organizations are introducing mindfulness practices. Companies such as Deutsche Bank is introducing mindfulness meditation. Google is introducing a wide program across the board of meditation. More and more business leaders, those who are in the middle, the best leaders, are meditating. For example, Ray Dalio, one of the leading leaders today. I meditate every day. It's such a great investment. More than any other factor in my success. It opens up the two sides of the brain, brings creativity and open-mindedness. It allows you to clear your head and bring an equanimity, a calm to everything. Here, what Ray Dalio is also doing is connecting between success and happiness, between leadership and well-being. To summarize, when it comes to absorption, our third part of the model, what most people say, what the average believe in, is that peak performance and peak experience is rare. Only happens a few times throughout your life. That's what the psychopathology of the average tells us. What the most successful and the happiest leaders tell us is that you need to engage mindfully to make the ordinary extraordinary. And that's accessible to you at every moment in your life. Right now, 1 minute from now, during the lunch that you will have today, during the walk that you could take with a friend, during a conference call, or while you're listening to a friend or your child or your colleague. Extraordinary peak experiences are there, potentially all around us and within us. All we need to do is to be present more of the time to the miracle. And to be present, we can practice mindfully regularly, or we can go to a mindfulness teacher once a week to remind us to be present in our day-to-day activities. And then, and only then, can we derive the most potential from the wealth of both happiness and success that exists within us and all around us. Thank you. To just get your comments or questions. So please.
我想问沙尔老师的是，就是那个关于那冥想的话，就是有没有什么具体的方法，在每一天的生活当中去进行？然后就是，我们通过什么样的方式去检验我们的一个冥想的效果？然后主要是这样的，好，谢谢。
So, let me take you a little bit through the history of meditation research. The first research that was done on meditation was conducted on professional meditators. These are people who meditate have been meditating for 30 years. Sometimes they go for a whole year without talking and just meditating for 8 hours, 12 hours a day. So these are professional meditators. And they're around here, you know, they're in the Himalayan mountains, the Tibetan mountains. And they're extraordinary individuals. When they brought these individuals to the lab, and this is what they did, they studied their brain. One of the things that they studied, just as an example, was the ratio between the left side and the right side of the prefrontal cortex. That means the left front side and the right front side of their brains. Not the whole brain, but just this part here. And what they found, what we know, is that this ratio is related to our happiness levels. Specifically, people who have more activity in the left side of the front of the brain compared to the right side, they tend to be happier. People who have more activity on the right side compared to the left side tend to be more depressed or sad. People who have the same level are okay. So they created a bell curve, statistically, where most people are in the middle, about the same, but then the depressed people have more activation on the right side, the happy people have more activation on the left side. And then they brought in those professional meditators. Those who have been meditating for 20, 30 years, hours and hours every day. They brought them to the lab, and initially when they tested them, neuroscientists tested them, they thought there was a problem with the machine. Why? Because they had never seen scores anywhere near to what they found in those meditators. There was a lot more activation on the right side relative to the left side. They were the happiest brains that they had ever seen. They called them the happiest people in the world. They found no one to the same extent, to the same degree, was able to cultivate a happy brain as they did. Another finding, which is interesting, was that, you know how when there is a loud noise, you jump up when you hear it? So if something just fell in the back of the room, everyone would jump up. It happens to everyone, even people who are from the FBI in America, who shoot guns all the time. When they shoot the gun, they move, even though they try to train not to move. Those meditators were put in a meditative state and were told to remain calm, even when there is a loud noise. The loud noise didn't affect them at all. First time in history when researchers identified people who could do that. So they have some remarkable abilities. And when I talk about meditation, you ask the method, I'm talking about sitting meditation or Qigong or Tai Chi or yoga. Or listening to music with your eyes closed and focused, not as background. There are a few key elements to meditation. One is focus. Focus on whatever it is that you're doing. Wherever you go, there you are. Just be present to what you're doing. If you're sitting down and thinking about the breath going in and out, focus on that. If you're moving, as in Qigong, just focus on the movement or on the Qi flowing through you. Be present. If you're listening to music, just listen to music. So it's being focused is the first thing, on one thing. The second thing to keep in mind is that meditation is ultimately not about the focus, but rather about returning to focus. It's an important distinction. Meditation is not about the focus, but it's about returning to focus. What does this mean? You see, many people come to me or to other people who teach meditation and say, I can't meditate because my mind wanders all the time. And the answer to that is that meditation is not about focusing on one thing all the time. The meditation is bringing back your focus to the one thing. There is a Vietnamese monk by the name of Mingyur Rinpoche. And he wrote a wonderful book called The Joy of Living. And in it, he talks about meditation and coming back to focus. And he says every time when you meditate and your mind wanders and you catch your mind wandering, these are all oops moments. Why oops moments? Because oops, my focus went. I'm bringing it back. Oops, it went again, and I'm bringing it back. Meditators talk about the monkey mind that is all over. And what you need to do is simply each time bring it back. And if it leaves a second later, bring it back to focus on your breath or your motion or the music. Meditation is not about focus. It's okay if you lose your focus. Meditation is simply about returning to focus. And if it happens 30 times in 5 minutes, that's okay. If it happens twice in 10 minutes, that's okay too. Which brings me to the third important element of meditation, which is there is no good or bad meditation. Meditation is about giving yourself the permission to be human. Meditation is about fully accepting whatever it is that you're experiencing. And just getting to that state is a big step forward in terms of attaining overall happiness. There's no good or bad meditation. There is simply meditation. So if you lose your focus 30 times and return to focus, that's fine. Twice, that's fine too. There's a story about a meditation teacher and his student. And the student learns with this teacher for a long time. And after a few years, he comes to the teacher and says, I'm very frustrated because I can't focus. I lose my focus all the time during meditation. And the teacher said, don't worry about it. That will pass. You'll get over it. 3 years later, the student comes to the teacher and says, you were right. It passed away. I'm really able to focus now. I've mastered the art of meditation. To which the master said, don't worry, that will pass. You will lose your focus again. That's what meditation is about. There's no good or bad meditation. There is simply meditation. And finally, the important thing about meditation is to find the method that works for you. For many years, I tried to sit down and meditate, and I just didn't connect to it. I couldn't motivate myself. I couldn't create a ritual around it. And then I started yoga and Qigong and really connected to that because the movement helped me concentrate. Today, most of my meditation is through music. I listen to beautiful Zen music, quiet music, music with water in the background, with birds in the background. This is what works for me. It doesn't mean that it's the right way to meditate. It's right for me. Just like when we talk about strength, it's about finding your strength, not someone else's strength. The same with meditation. It's finding what works for you, not what works for everyone else. Research by Oliver Sacks, who's an expert neuroscientist, expert on music. He was looking for what is the right music for us to listen to gain the maximum benefit. And he identified the exact right music. So many people think, oh, it's classical music, classical Western music. Other people think it's quiet, relaxing music. They're right and they're wrong. The right music, he found, is your favorite music, whatever it is. If you like cheesy songs like Whitney Houston and I Will Always Love You, that's fine. Listen to those songs. If you like classical music, that's fine. Listen to those. If you love jazz, that's okay. That's your music. If you love traditional Chinese music, listen to that. I do recommend once in a while listening to different kinds of music to expand your range. But ultimately, go with your heart. Just like with the form of meditation that you identify or the form of music that you identify. What is right for you? Learn from your best experiences. Apply Maslow's research to your life. Prescribe ways of meditating or ways of doing things from what works best for you.
Just thank you for your lecture. Appreciate your lecture.
Thank you.
And I just use Chinese to for my question.
Please.
这个问题呢，因为这个问题我用英语说不上来，所以说我用中文。因为 just this question is for a long time to confuse me。就是我觉得在这个社会下，就是这个 AI 啊，就是人工智能，包括所有的技术，都改变了所有我们现在所有的可能，而且实现了我们以前没有想到和想到的所有的东西，包括以后将来社会是什么样子的，我们都难以想象，因为社会发展太快了，就是互联网技术和 AI， 而且人的这种价值呢，在大 大幅的被弱化。就包括那个科幻小说，像《三体》，就是我觉得我没有看完，我觉得那个小说里面呢，就是能感觉出来，其实人在社会的发展过程中，似乎都成为了一种负担，因为就不需要那么多人了。就是这种，就是人的这种价值在大幅的弱化。在这样一个时代中，就像我们这些年轻人，我们因为这个，就包括 leadership 啊，包括这个 personal 这种 development， 就是我在美国也学了很多。但是现在在这样一种社会下，我们这些人在该怎么来去定位自己，而且整个社会的这种阶层啊，在不断的通过这种技术在固化，而且面对这种强大的社会和政府，我们根本就没有我们就很渺小。我们要寻找自己内心的那种幸福吗？这是不是一种变相的，就是像中国的一种在追求自己内心是阿 Q 吗？就是说的不太合适啊，或者怎么样？我就大概就这种，我的问题就是在这样一个社会时代的背景下，这种科技的进步下，我们这些人应该怎么来去抉择和发展自己？谢谢。
Good. Yeah, this is a great question and a very important one because you're right, the world is changing. You know, China today is not what China was 20 years ago or 50 years ago, and China 10 years from now is not going to be the same China that we know today. You know, you often probably hear, also here, as in the United States, that more and more educators are saying what we're educating our children for today is going to be old by the time, 10 years from now, because the world is changing so fast. So what does that mean in terms of our happiness? What does it mean in terms of us preparing for the future? Whether you're in your 40s, like me, or 50s, or 20s, or whether you're 12 years old. What does the future that is changing so fast mean? Because, my father is an engineer. He studied engineering, and yes, he always learned new things, but basically, the world didn't change so much. Today, if I'd studied engineering, even 20 years ago, the world is very different today than it was then. How can we prepare for the future, and what does it mean for our happiness? I'm glad you asked this question because this entire course is exactly about this idea. Meaning, 30 years ago, if we were teaching leadership, I wouldn't have to talk to you about happiness. Happiness would have been nice to have always, but it wouldn't be essential for leadership. Today, it is essential. Why? Because the jobs that we did in the past are no longer relevant today. The jobs that we did in the past today are taken over by machines. So a lot of the repetitive jobs, such as driving or picking up things, they're going to be done by machines. 10 years from now, the kids won't have to learn how to drive anymore because all the cars will be self-driving. China is among the world leaders in self-driving, autonomous cars. That's thousands, that's millions of jobs of bus drivers, of pilots, of ship captains, of taxi drivers, millions of jobs no longer relevant 10 years from now. Or assembly line workers. How many assembly line workers are there in China? Hundreds of millions, maybe. These jobs are not going to be there anymore 10 years, 20 years from now. The world is changing, and it's very scary. Do you know that there is a hotel in Japan, right now, in Japan, where 90% of the employees of the hotel are robots? So when you come to the hotel, you're not greeted by a person. It's a robot greeting you. There is no bell person who's taking your luggage to the room. It's a robot taking your luggage to the room. Now, it's an exception. Soon all hotels will be like that. What are all these people going to do? Here is what they're going to do. What they're going to have to do is be different from what machines can do. And how are we different? They'll need to innovate creativity. They'll need to be able to work in teams very well. They'll need to think outside the box. They'll need to be emotionally attentive, because the difference between humans and machines is that humans can feel. So all these soft skills of feeling, of innovation, of working together with people, all these skills will be critical in the coming years. And these are exactly the skills that are developed through psychology. They're exactly the skills that are enhanced through happiness. I'll give you an example of an industry where I spend a lot of time. So I work a lot with bankers. I work a lot with financial advisors. Now, what do financial advisors do? Financial advisors tell you how to spend your money, where to save, where to invest. There are thousands, tens of thousands of financial advisors just in the United States. Today, most of the work of financial advisors is done by robots, by computer programs. So these financial advisors, you know what they're doing today? They're learning what you're learning. They're learning about happiness. Why? Because a machine can help you invest your money in the right places, just like a human being can. The added value of a human being are all the soft skills of leadership, the innovation, creativity, the teamwork, the emotional part. That's where a human being is different from a machine. And these are the characteristics that you will need to cultivate as a future leader. So schools need to teach these things. You need to learn it in university, and also kids need to learn it in school, because these are the skills that will prepare them for a future in which robots, in which technology, AI, will be doing so much of what human beings have been doing for thousands, maybe millions of years. The world is changing. It will never be the same again. And to prepare for this world, to thrive and to flourish and to be happy in this world, we need to cultivate the very skills that I've been talking about in this course. The emotional skills associated with leading a happier life.